Conservancy, and I want to thank you all for joining us. I'd like to thank the Watershed Institute for partnering with us to present this series and opening their doors to welcome us all into their lovely home and share this event with folks who are viewing online. I'd like to thank the Watershed staff and the Sourlands Conservancy staff and volunteers for planning this event and helping us present it. Thank you so much. This takes a lot of work, and we really appreciate all the time and energy that you all put into this. And I'd like to thank all of you for your continued support of both of our organizations. Are there any Sourlands Conservancy members here tonight? Thank you. Thank you so much for your support throughout the year. We're working hard to plant trees. We've almost planted 50,000 trees. We're about to plant our 50,000th next week, in fact. Trees and shrubs in the Sourlands. We're losing more than 1 million, so we've got a ways to go, but we're very proud of that accomplishment. If you're not a member already, please consider supporting our work and help spread the word. If you've never visited the Sourlands, if you've never visited the Watershed before, please do. It's glorious in the fall. I love to hike the trails here year-round. There's always something new to see. The Watershed Institute is doing important work to protect and restore our water and natural environment in central New Jersey through conservation, advocacy, science, and education. If this is your first in-person Talk of the Sourlands seminar, here's how it's going to go. I'll introduce our speaker. He'll present for about an hour and then answer questions. We will send a follow-up email after the event with links to books, articles, and other details that Bruce references in his talk so that you can learn more. Please be sure to keep an eye out for that email. There'll be a link there to a short survey. We've heard that folks are having trouble finding out about our event, so we want to hear how you found out about it and hear your suggestions, if any, about how we can improve. Thank you in advance for filling that out. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker. Bruce Turner caught his first bluegill at age 4. Needless to say, fishing has been in Bruce's DNA since the beginning. A New Jersey native, Bruce has always been involved in fly fishing throughout his life. He's traveled the world to fly fish, and he even co-owned a fly shop in Pennington for 13 years. But in the more than 50 years he's been fishing, teaching the sport he loves to others is what gives him the most satisfaction. He tells us, "Nothing gives me greater pleasure than to work with a customer who's just getting started in fly fishing. I love sharing my knowledge and pointing them in the right direction," he says. Pointing them in the right direction is what Bruce does best at Orvis Princeton. So whether you've been fishing for as long as Bruce has, or if you've never even picked up a fly rod, Bruce looks forward to having the chance to help you out, give you the guidance you need, and put you on the path to your next angling adventure. Hi, welcome. Thank you, Bruce, and take it away.
Cool. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. So I've talked to a few of you, and it seems like we've got a lot of people that are new to fly fishing or maybe have never fly fished before. So that's good. I would say there's no bad habits we have to unwind when we run into that in our classes at the store. Like I said, I work for Orvis Princeton, which is in the Princeton Shopping Center. Orvis is actually the oldest fly fishing company in the country and maybe even the world. We've been going on 170 years now and invented most of the modern equipment, if you want to call it that, back in the 1800s, bamboo fly rods and modern fly reels and that. But we're not using that anymore. We're using good modern stuff. Let me just switch this. Come on, switch it. Can you control the keyboard or no?
No.
Oh, okay.
And it would help if you stand there because the microphone for the Zoom.
Oh, okay. Well, I can talk pretty loud though. I'm pretty loud. Anyway. All right, let's see. What are we doing? Arrow or enter?
Arrow.
Yeah. No. Here, take a look real quick. Should be these guys, right? Which one? So just Alt Tab?
No, you should just,
Oh, that one now. There you go. All right. So let's talk about the gear basically. All right. So fly rods. If you've done any kind of spin fishing, you might be familiar with like ultralight, very light, delicate rods for small panfish or small trout, right? And then medium action rods, and then maybe heavy action rods for saltwater net. Fly rods follow a little bit of a different system, and it's what's called a line weight system. As in the sport, what we're really doing, we're casting the line. The line is what's doing the work, right? In spin fishing, you've got, typically weightless monofilament line with a heavy object on the end, right? You flick that bail and you give it a flick, right? And that lure goes out for the ride on that weightless monofilament. If you look at some of these flies I brought, even some of the bigger saltwater flies that we'll use for striped bass and other offshore species, they're virtually weightless. So you couldn't cast one of those with a spinning rod, right? So we use a line, and the line has a physical weight. And so the rods are designated typically from about 1 weight up to 14, right? Think of one as that real delicate, light, ultralight rod. Think of that 14 weight as a marlin stick, or a tarpon. And they've all been caught on a fly.
can I ask you to click this on?
Yeah.
Possibly for the people on the Zoom.
Oh, there's a Zoom call going through.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, here we go. So that's how fly rods are designated, right? And so the line works in conjunction with the rod, okay? So if it's going to be a 1-weight rod, we're going to use a 1-weight fly line. If we're going to use a 5-weight rod, we're going to use a 5-weight fly line, and so on. So the outfits are basically matched. That's the nice thing about it, okay? And then the same thing with the reel. A fly reel, is going to be matched to the rod. That's obviously going to hold our fly line, okay? What's known as a single action type of reel, where each revolution basically just collects the line. It's very simple. It's actually a very simple equipment setup, okay? And then as far as the lengths are concerned, the most common sizes would be, again, in that little 1-weight, 2-weight ultralight kind of rod. You might be looking at a rod that's maybe 6 feet long, 6.5 feet long, which compared to a spinning rod is, that's like an average size of a spinning rod, right? Most of our fly rods that we're going to fish are going to be 8, 8.5, 9 feet. Now we're even getting up to 10s and 11s, right? And certain styles of rods. And the reason for the length is that aids with the casting. It gives you more leverage. It allows you to control that fly line a lot easier with that added length, right? So when we're setting up an outfit, or when we're looking to, maybe buy our first fly rod, we just have to give some thought. The questions that I have are, what are you going to fish for? What do you like to fish for? Is it going to be trout? Is it going to be bass? Is it going to be panfish? Or is it going to be saltwater? And so what we want to try to do is match that outfit by line weight to that target fish or the species of fish that we're going to go after. And so, again, down in that 1-weight, 2-weight, 3-weight range, think small fish, small streams, right? As we get into our, what I'll kind of call normal range of freshwater fishing, trout, bass, any kind of panfish, maybe smallmouth bass out on the Delaware, right? Now we're going to talk 4, 5, or 6-weight rods. Those are right in the middle of the scale. That's going to allow you to cast any size fly that you'd ever expect to have to deliver for any of those freshwater species. And then when we start thinking maybe heavy freshwater, and what I mean by that is bigger fish, bigger water. What's popular right now is a lot of anglers are heading up to New York State to the Salmon River, which is a salmon fishery. And these people are going after king salmon, right, that are 20, 25, 30 pounds, right? This is the time of year I hate, because this is when all these broken rods come back to the shop because they've undergunned the size. You know, they should have been using a 9 or a 10 weight, and they're using a 6 or a 7 or an 8 weight rod. And I mean, the fish are they're tough. They start. It's a big fish in a big river, heavy water, and they're trying to control these fish. And so you need to have the right tool for the job. And so when we start looking at those bigger species of fish, salmon, striped bass on the shore right now. I mean, striped bass showed up big time this week. There's even tuna within 30 yards of the beach right now, all along New Jersey. So then that's when we start talking about 8 weights, 9 weights, 10 weights. And then as you get into some of the really bigger species, tarpon in Florida, sailfish, you know, any of the offshore species, that's when you might end up at that 14 weight kind of rod. But the way I describe it, those are two distinct ends of the scale. Most of us aren't going to go chase sailfish in Costa Rica. You know, we might go to the Salmon River, do it at least once for the experience, but it's crazy. It's a zoo. So if we're talking about fishing here in the Northeast, or even like out in Montana, as we were talking, I use a 5 weight out there. You know, a 5 weight rod will get anything and everything done in freshwater that you're ever going to ask it to do. And then just like any sport, fly fishers are collectors. You know, do we have one rod? No, right? You know, don't ask me how many fly rods I have. You know, I got more than I need, but it's like, ooh, that's a cool rod. I need that rod. And you just specialize. You specialize with it. So, but the key is, again, matching that outfit to really what you expect to go after. Okay? And then the basic components, the last piece of the puzzle is that, you know, we have this fly line, which is, it's weighted, even though it floats, but that's what's doing the casting. You'll be able to see this one better. But then at the end is where we attach a leader. And the leader is nothing more than monofilament, you know, fishing line, you know, that you're used to. But that's what a fly line looks like. This happens to be a 10 weight. So this would be salmon, you know, striped bass, bluefish, anything like that along the coast. And so at the end of it, this is what we're casting. And then most of these lines have a loop in the end, and that's where we attach the monofilament leader, right? And that's the fishing end of it. That's what does the presentation of the fly to the fish. And that's the basic setup. Simple reel, rod, say 4, 5, 6 weight for freshwater. We use most fly lines, even though there's all kinds of specialty lines. The majority of our fishing is done with a floating line, and gives you good visibility, gives you good presentation to the fish, right? And you're able to really be able to control it a little bit better. So let's talk about flies. And as I'm going along, if there's any questions, just let me have it, right? I'll be able to answer it for you, okay? So if we're talking about, I'm going to focus on trout, and then I'll show you some other examples. But what we're basically doing with this sport is, you know, it's not bait fishing. I say it all the time. Fly fishing is an illusion, okay? We're using flies that don't have any scent to them, so it's not power bait, you know, or it's not a salmon egg, you know, soaked in oil in a jar, so there's no scent advantage. It's not a wiggling red wiggler worm that we throw on a hook that attracts the fish, you know. I think as a kid we used to use corn, right, for trout. That worked pretty good. Cheese, I can remember making dough balls for carp, you know. But that's not what we're doing in fly fishing, right? Fly fishing, like I said, it's an illusion, but it's a very effective way to catch fish, because what we're doing is we are using flies. And come up and take a look at the presentation. I brought some samples of trout flies, saltwater flies, bass flies. But what we're doing is, you know, we're using a pattern that imitates a natural food source, right? What they're used to seeing. And in most of I'll focus on trout specifically first, even hatchery trout, you know, once they get dumped in a trout stream, I mean, they're not getting fed Purina trout chow twice a day anymore, okay? They don't. They got to eat or they're going to die, right? And they have it in their DNA. I've seen fresh stock trout start taking dry flies on the surface during a hatch, right? So they have it in them. So what we do is we're going to mimic that food source, right? And in most of our streams, you know, you've got good populations of mayflies and caddisflies, right? Those are your two primary bugs, and they're everywhere, right? I mean, they're here in Stony Brook. They're in every body of water, right? Those two main species. So what we do is we use flies that imitate the different life stages of that bug. And what's really cool, what really kind of got me fired up when I was a kid, was learning that these bugs go from being a caterpillar to a butterfly underwater, right? They go through this metamorphosis and they hatch. So they start out as what is known as a nymph. So think of it as the caterpillar. They live down on the rocks, underneath the rocks, in the gravel, in the silt, right? And that's what trout are eating all the time because it's an easy food source for them, right? So we use a fly pattern that mimics that stage of that mayfly. Or in the case of the caddisfly, that's actually more like a little caterpillar. It looks like a little worm. In fact, the watershed has samples of them out here in that index little thing I was looking at there. They got caddisflies in there. They got mayflies in there. So what we're doing is we're going to, and that's what makes fly fishing fun, is that it's a thinking sport. You know, I mean, I say it all the time, and I've done it, and there's nothing wrong with it, but anybody can put a worm on a hook, put the rod in a forked stick, and sit back in a chair and wait for something to happen, right? I've done that, but that's not fly fishing. Fly fishing is we're like problem solving. We're like, okay, what's in this stream? And one of the ways we do it, which is fun too, you just go in there and pick up a rock, in the stream, and you'll see these bugs on the bottom of the rocks. And if you see these little guys with legs scurrying around, that's a mayfly. If you see a bunch of little cases, like you see mud wasps on your garage, that's a little caddis in there. So if I turn that rock over and I see 10 of those cases and I see one little scurrying mayfly, guess what I'm going to fish? I'm going to fish caddisfly. There's more caddis in that stream, right? I call it the cheeseburger and pizza theory, right? Mayflies or cheeseburgers, caddisflies or pizzas. I see more pizzas in that stream, what do you think I'm going to fish? It's really that simple if you kind of start to boil it down, And then what you do is you can observe. Meaning, if I walk down to a stream and, knowing that these bugs are going to hatch. Now, mayflies got their name for a main reason. They're most active like in April, May, June. That's when they go from being that caterpillar to that butterfly underwater. And then it's a hatch, right? When that happens, right? When you have mayflies hatching and they're on the surface now, what happens is they swim to the surface, bloop, and then they sit up there like little sailboats. And they'll drift with the current for a little while. They got to dry their wings before they can fly off, right? Well, that's when they're most vulnerable. And so when you start seeing this on the surface, okay, now it's time to put the dry fly on, okay? The buffet table has moved to the surface. It's that simple, right? If I walk down to the stream and there's nothing going on, I'm not putting on a dry fly, a fly that floats. I'm going to fish something that sinks, like that little nymph pattern that I know is there, and I know they're eating all the time, right? I mean, one of the hardest things in fly fishing to do is when there's no surface activity to get that trout to go up where it doesn't want to go, because that's where danger is. Ospreys, eagles, herons, you name it, they don't want to go up there, right? They'd rather sit down here on the bottom and eat those little nymphs as they're getting washed downstream. Well, like I said, when that buffet table moves up to the surface, they don't have a choice. And that's when the risk reward takes over. There's so many of these bugs, and I'm talking thousands, right? Hatches, and especially on some of our bigger streams, Pennsylvania streams, right? Oh my God, you get at some of these bigger streams in Pennsylvania that have huge insect populations. I mean, it's just the surface is boiling with fish, But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, what's called matching. We match the hatch, basically. It's a phrase that was coined by a famous guy here in Princeton. And Ernie Schwebert, and in fact, our local TU chapter is named after him. But he kind of broke the code back in the 50s. He wrote a book called Matching the Hatch. And he was the guy that identified the bugs, but then also created the fly patterns that imitated those bugs, and especially the dry flies. But here are two good examples of trout flies. So on the left, that's what's known as a pheasant tail. A lot of the flies get their names from the materials that they're tied with. And those are actually individual fibers off the tail of a ringneck pheasant. But that's a nymph. You'll see in a lot of the nymph patterns, there's a bead. What's that do? Sinks it, puts it down on the bottom. I like to say it puts it right in that trout's kitchen. That's where they want to see it. That's where they're used to seeing it, right? The one thing these little bugs aren't good as swimmers. If they get dislodged from under a rock or gravel or whatever, they're tumbling downstream, that's all they're doing. They're just tumbling. And that trout is just sitting there saying, I got to eat or I'm going to die. Oh, here comes one. Boom. And that's what they do all day long. When that hatch happens, now we shift over to the dry fly. And that's a fly that floats. And out of all these flies here, and if you came into our store, I think our fly bins, because we have to count them every year, there's like 12 to 15,000 flies in there, right? But there's only two types of flies. They either sink or they float. That's it, okay? So our job as, fly fishers is to kind of figure out, okay, what's going on? And when we see that surface activity, okay, it's time to put on that dry fly, okay? One other food source for trout, this is kind of like a cool little pattern, but it's a little bait fish. Big fish, it's a fact of life. Big fish eat little fish. They just do, okay? So minnow patterns, they'll be referred to as streamers. You'll hear that word. All that means is it's imitating a bait fish, okay? So that's one. The one on the right is called a woolly bugger. It's got a funny name, but it's probably one of the most effective fish catching patterns of all time, okay? More trout, more bass have been caught on that pattern, because when all that fuzzy marabou, which is nothing more than just a cheap chicken feather, that's the tail, that's what creates it. When that gets wet, it just moves and it just pulses through the water, and it's just, it's basically saying, come get me, to the fish. It's got a lot of action. It's a wet fly. You see the bead. It's going to sink, but that is a deadly pattern, and probably number one. If I could only have one fly, it would be one of those. That's it. That will catch everything. Yep.
What is that guy imitating?
Well, so there's a lot of different theories on that, right? So that fly, it's probably the most common color would either be black or, olive or green, right? Some people will say, well, it could imitate a leech in the stream. It's with that dark profile, maybe a stonefly, okay? Yeah, in all black, it's not necessarily going to be a minnow imitation. This would be a better minnow imitation, or something more minnow-like with maybe tied with deer hair or bucktails or whatever. But it's just a big meal. Trout aren't that smart. They really aren't. We give them way too much credit. Again, they're sitting there saying, I got to eat or I'm going to die, right? And they go, come up here after and look at how small some of these nymphs are. That trout's going through life eating one potato chip at a time. It's like, really? And then somebody throws a tomahawk steak in front of them. What do you think they're going to do? And when they hit this thing, they hit it with a vengeance. There's no doubt when a fish takes a woolly bugger, right, or a streamer, or a big nymph pattern, they crush that thing. So there's different theories. Another big bug would be hellgrammites, right? So it's just a big meal, but that action in the water, it looks alive. It looks like it's moving. And so some flies are direct imitations, okay? That little pheasant tail, that is a blue-winged olive nymph mayfly pattern. That's it. It only looks that way, right? Woolly buggers are a style of fly, and this is where it's fly tires, and if you want to do that, we do classes on that too. That's a lot of fun. That's arts and crafts for adults. It's fun. A style of fly, like I have woolly buggers that are black, I have woolly buggers that are white, I have woolly buggers that are olive. we did a fly tying class for some scouts a couple of years ago, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. I guess they're all together now. Anyway, we tied pink ones. Girls wanted to tie pink ones. Like, okay. And then we went out fishing that afternoon and they all caught fish on them. So I think it's more the action, than anything. So that's a style. So there's both types when it comes to fly tying. Direct imitations, it can only be this way. And then there's the creative side of it, which is a lot of fun. So those are your basic patterns for trout: nymphs, dry flies. Again, these are referred to as streamers, which are your bait fish imitations. And you'll hear the word attractor pattern too. There are some flies, I don't have a picture of it, but a dry fly, it's called a royal wolf. I mean, it looks like a Christmas tree ornament. Again, trout are curious, but it's tied with green and then red floss and then green floss again, and it's got white wings, and then it's got a brown hackle around it. I mean, like I said, it should hang on a Christmas tree. Famous fly out west, very popular out west. So, like I said, trout aren't that smart, and they get attracted to things. One of the techniques to fish nymphs with is to use a little bobber. It's called we call them strike indicators because we're fly fishermen, but they're bobbers, okay? And what it does is it tells you what's going on down below with that nymph, right? Well, the most common strike indicators are like chartreuse and orange. Well, I can't tell you how many times I made a cast, put it out there, and the darn trout comes up and eats a strike indicator. So they sample stuff. They're constantly putting stuff in their mouth that they shouldn't. Okay. So that covers trout. So another fun species, and this is something to really strongly consider because our trout seasons sometimes can be short. Like this year was a pretty short trout season here in New Jersey, mainly because we had lack of water and we had warm water. Okay. And trout really can't tolerate water temperatures much into the 70s. And even if you did hook one and play it, it's probably gonna die because it's just built up so much lactic acid that it's not gonna recover in that hot water. They need cold water. So we don't stop fishing, we just shift gears. We go over here. There's the watershed has a great pond, a Wargo pond. Fish that's really good. The Sourland one up on mountain, that's where we do our classes. That's a really good warm water, what we call warm water fishing. But that's going to be bass, it's going to be panfish. And they're all a ton of fun on a fly. And in a lot of cases, they're a lot easier to catch than trout. Trout can just kind of be psychotic. I mean, they just don't want to play some days. Where these guys, I mean, something slaps on the water surface, that bass is like, whoa, what was that? That was like the dinner bell. They come looking for it. So bass and warm water species are a great, great way to extend the fly fishing season. And now we get into some fun patterns, right? Some big stuff. None of these little tiny trout flies. I mean, we're talking big frog patterns, topwater poppers. I will tell you though, that woolly bugger, I've caught one of the biggest bass of my life on that 2 years ago. And, hit a regular size 10 woolly bugger, and this bass was like 9 pounds. So, but bass are fun because now you really get consistent, like what we call top water action. You're casting that fly out, it's plopping down, and then you're chugging it, and it's moving across the surface. And then all of a sudden, bass with a mouth that big comes up and just inhales the thing, and then the game is on. So, bass is a really good summertime sport. And then we get into saltwater, all right? Another good diversion. Striped bass is probably number one. And striped bass are fun on a fly. When they're there, you're gonna catch them. Because again, the difference in saltwater, those fish are constantly feeding. They are, I mean, especially, striped bass can be a little tricky, but like bluefish, hook up a 8 to 10 pound bluefish on a fly rod and you'll know what you're hooked up to. And they're just eating machines. They'll eat anything. I mean, I've said for years, I could throw a Budweiser can out there with a hook on it and catch a bluefish. All you gotta do is reel it really fast, move it really fast on the surface. But saltwater opens up a whole nother area fly fishing. So it doesn't have to just be trout, you know. And again, if our trout season is short, doesn't mean your fly fishing season's over. You go to warm water species here in freshwater, or you move into saltwater. And we've got great beaches. I'm going to show you some slides of where to go and access. Island Beach State Park, Sandy Hook. I mean, you just walk right out on the beach, and it's easy. Here are some typical patterns. In saltwater, it really even just gets a lot simpler because the main food source is usually some kind of bait fish. That's it, and it's just a different size. So number one would probably be this one on the left. It's called a clouser minnow, okay? Imitates when and that's tied with deer hair, it's bucktail. When it gets wet, it just gets long and skinny, and it looks like a sand eel. And sand eels are, you know, about that big, and that's what you see when you're down at the beach, those little schools on the beach. That's what they're feeding on, you know? And then the one on the right, that's kind of like what's known as a deceiver, a lefty's deceiver. And that just has now that really looks like a bait fish. You know, that looks like a minnow, you know? So that is a really good pattern in saltwater. So I can go fishing for stripers and blues down at the shore and literally just take those two patterns. That's it. You know, I don't need anything more than that. So they work really, really good. No questions? Good?
And so those are top water?
No, these both sink. They both sink. We do have top water. I mean, I've got some top water stuff. Like this is a top water popper. And that's all that is just cylinder foam with some shiny Mylar tape around it. That'll float, and we'll use them from time to time, especially if the fish are keen. You know, if you see them keen on the surface where they're just going crazy up on top, then we'll put, you know, that's our saltwater dry fly, you know. But most of these, like these won't, the clouser sinks very slow. That bait fish sinks really slow. So as I cast it out, I'm going to start stripping it right in. So it may only go that far below the surface. I can let it sink farther if I want, if the fish are down farther. But if they're busting bait on the surface, we'll keep it right up near the top and just strip it in. All right, this is what everybody wants to know, right? Now, where do I go? Okay. We've got some good little streams right in our backyard. You don't have to go hours and hours, okay? So I've got a mixture here of, you know, lake and a couple streams. First one is right up the road on 31. Does everybody know where Amwell Lake is off of 31? It's got really good bass fishing. Gets stocked with trout in the springtime, so it starts out being a trout stream, okay? It's got some huge carp in it right now, and that's like the hot species in fly fishing because they're so hard to catch. They really are. Because we're using flies, and they have like ultra sensitive taste buds, I guess, and scent, whatever, barbels out front. I mean, they're hard to get fooled. And I mean, that's like one of the hot species to get right now, you know. So it's got some really big carp in it. But it's a good spot right in our backyard.
What fly are you using for carp?
So so there's two patterns. One will look like, almost like a little damsel nymph. It'll kind of look like a little woolly bugger, kind of, but it looks like a damselfly larva. And then the other thing that supposedly is guaranteed, but I've never seen a mulberry bush. These things eat mulberries. So if you can find a mulberry bush along the lake or stream, it'll be like a little maroon colored. It'll almost look like sucker spawn, like yarn, like tied in a little, make it look like a little berry. Apparently they eat these. I've never caught one on a berry. I don't know. But yeah, that's the other pattern that people will use for them. But usually it's some type of, because they're bottom feeders, you know, and they're going along the bottom and they're searching and they eat. I mean, I caught one up on the South Branch of the Raritan by mistake on a little size 16 pheasant tail nymph. And it was in the fast water. And I just caught a brown trout. And then I just caught a rainbow trout. And then I thought I caught the mother of all trout. I mean, this thing, I didn't see it for like 20 minutes. I'm playing this thing, playing. I'm like, oh my God, it's, it's a monster brown trout. And then I got a glimpse of it, and it's kind of golden, the big scales, and I'm like, oh my God, it's a huge brown. Oh God, I can't lose this thing. Finally, after like a half hour, I get it down into some slow water, and here it's like a 15-pound carp. A little fly. I mean, it was kind of cool, but I'm like, oh man, I thought it was a trap. If I had been targeting it, I would have been a lot happier. But yeah, they're tough. They're a tough fish. But there's Amwell. It's an aerial shot. The road coming in would kind of come in from over here. If you know where like Madalena's Cheesecake is, Quick Check's right across the street. There's a lane. Just look for that big brown sign that says New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection or whatever, and you go back right in. There's a parking area, and you can go all the way around it. If you have a little kayak or something, then you're really golden. Because now you can fish a lot of spots that you can't reach from shoreline. So that would be a good spot to consider. Again, stocked with trout in the springtime. Once the water warms up, then it turns into a warm water bass fishery, right on through the summer months, back into the fall. I don't think the state does a fall trout stocking there. They might. Not this year. Well, they're not stocking anything right now, but I know I forget who I saw. I ran into this kid down in Pennington. He was showing me some pictures of some trout he kept. They had put in the state, I think in the lakes like that, they were putting a lot of breeder trout in there. And I mean, we're talking, 24-inch browns, big fish that he was catching out of there too. So, but that's a good spot, good local spot. Anybody know where this place is? Wickichioke Creek, right? So if you know where Surgeonsville is, right? If you go into through Surgeonsville, you're heading out of town, kind of heading up into like Rosemont, that area. There's a covered bridge. I think it's one of the few only covered bridges in New Jersey. That's the Wickichioke right there. Make a left, follow it down. You can fish there, right there at that covered bridge. I've caught fish there. There's a really nice run there, and then there's a good sized pool. And then you follow it down, a little mixture of open, but then also quite a bit of posted land that's private. But then you come down, you go across another bridge, and right there's a pull off, there's a parking area, and that's a really big, nice deep pool right there at that bridge. And then downstream, there's probably about 2 or 3 other spots that are, you'll see it, they're really good, good depth, really good looking water that you can fish. And then ultimately, it goes right into the Delaware in Stockton. If you know where the Prallsville Mill is, that's that creek that you see. And that's a good spot if you want to catch smallmouth in the Delaware. You park there in where the Prallsville Mill is, and there's the DNR Canal. There's a parking area, and then you go right down the river, and that's a whole gravel bar that goes out, and the smallmouth bass sit right on the edge of that gravel bar right out in the Delaware. So, especially in the summertime when it's relatively low and you don't need waders or anything, just go out there and wet wade. That's a good spot where it dumps into the river. Lockatong Creek. So this one is just up the road, a good landmark. You can get to it same way coming through Surgeonsville. You got to navigate a little bit. I found it easier just to stay on 29, and it's right up near Bulls Island. It comes into the Delaware by Bulls Island, but you make a right on Federal Twist Road. Federal Twist Road is a great big winery on the right-hand side. You just go right up to the top, make the first right. I want to say it's like Byram something or other road, but it's the first right, and that brings you right down to a bridge. And then the Lockatong, that's a good spot there. And then if you just follow that road up a little bit further, there's a name. It's part of the Hunterdon County Land Trust, I believe. And it's got a 2-person name, hiking trails there. And you can park there and then you walk down. And I'll tell you what, man, it looks like that. It's gorgeous water and really hard table rock. And then, it drops off and there's some really good runs. And it gets stocked 4 times during the trout season. So it's right here. So I started hitting that and it was good. It was a good spot. And I don't think I ever saw anybody else fishing it. Everybody hikes it, so it's a good spot right in our backyard. Stony Brook, caught my first trout there when I was 10 years old. So, it suffers from low water right now. It gets warm pretty quick the last couple of years, but the state still stocks it. They stock, I'll see people on the way into the store there on Rosedale Road, but it gets stocked. Old Mill Road, Delaware Avenue, that's where I caught my first trout, and we used to call it the old Green Bridge going into Pennington. Goes up towards Kunkel Park. They don't stock Titus Mill Road anymore. And I think they might stock at 518, but it's got to have water. So, but that's a good fishery, good little local fishery. I mean, if you got an hour to kill, you want to go down and wet a line, it's a good local stream. And then the last one, now we're starting to move up a little bit further north. The Sunnyside section is just outside of Flemington. So if you're on Route 31, you go across the South Branch of the Raritan, you come up, there's the first traffic light, there's the sign for Stanton Station. So you're going into Stanton Station, you come right in, you can't miss it, you T on River Road, and you just follow River Road. And there's access points all along there. And that's a really good stream. Same thing, it's kind of a springtime deal. It starts to get pretty warm. So just shift gears. It's got a real good population of smallmouth bass. And it's a really good summertime. In fact, my dad and I, one time, we put a John boat in way up there and we floated it all the way down to, below 31, all the way down downstream and had a ball. So it's another one you can float if there's enough water. And then here's one of our probably most popular places. So New Jersey has a couple of what they call trout conservation areas. And these are either streams that have had some stream improvement work done on them and have some type of special regulation. They used to be fly fishing only. Now they're artificial only. They limit the amount of fish you can keep. We don't necessarily keep a lot of fish fly fishing. But the Ken Lockwood Gorge is probably one of the most popular, right? Then, I'll start at the top. The Big Flat Brook is way up in Sussex County. Okay? It's all the way up at the top of the state. That's a special regulation area. It's called the Blewett Tract area. Then there's the Pequest River, which is, anybody know where Hot Dog Johnny's is? On Route 46, right? Anybody's going to the Poconos went past Hot Dog Johnny's. That's the Pequest, right there. So all along there behind Hot Dog Johnny's, if you went upstream from that, you're actually going to run into the state trout hatchery. So that's a good spot. That can be a good spot. It'll extend the season a little bit because you've got a lot of cold water coming out of the raceways at the hatchery. So that keeps that section of the Pequest colder longer, right? The Musconetcong River. So that's going to be right up off of Route 31. Now you're heading into like Washington. Route 57 goes towards Hackettstown, and it's right down on the right-hand side. You'll see a sign for it, and it's Point Mountain. It's the Point Mountain Trout Conservation Area. The state did a really nice restoration project on that stream. So there's about 1.5 miles of really good, like fishy water. They dug it out, created changes in the direction of the stream. Really good holding water, and that's a good one. And then, like I said, the Ken Lockwood Gorge, that's on the South Branch. That's up in the town of Highbridge, and that's really good. That's almost 3 miles of really good trout water. It's probably some of our best trout water in the state. Just keep in mind, it's New Jersey. Can be crowded. Would I go to the gorge on a Saturday or a Sunday? Probably not. If you can go up during a weekday, yeah, and you're going to have, a little more open water to yourself. The one I haven't personally fished though is Tom's River, but over in Ocean County, there's Tom's River, and that's got trout in it. So it's more of like a brackish, kind of slow, meandering type of stream. But I haven't ventured over to that side of the state. And then just stretching out a little bit in terms of distance, if you just go over into Pennsylvania, and you've got the Little Lehigh in Allentown, Pennsylvania. It's a spring creek. Stays cold 12 months of the year. Water's coming out of the ground at 52 degrees. Fish is good in August, never freezes in January. So you can fish year-round there. Right by it is Saucon Creek. That's a really good stream. I fished that several times.
and that's just before Allentown, right by Bethlehem. Monocacy is up in Bethlehem. And then there's Little Cedar Creek in Allentown. That's another good one. And then there's the Bushkill in Easton, right near the Crayola factory, if you know where that is. So, this is just an idea to say, you know what? Within an hour or so of here, once I've maybe hit a lot of the local stuff and I want to, move out a little bit, maybe move up a little bit, because now these are typically year-round trout streams. They cold longer, and they're really good pieces of water. Let's see. I talked about the Delaware. Smallmouth bass fishing, great summertime fishery. Bulls Island is a great place to go to, right off of 29 north of Stockton and below Frenchtown. So it's a good spot. And then when we shift gears and go to the salt, right? We've got a couple of really good spots. Sandy Hook, that's a great spot, because now what that's also doing is it's getting you out closer to the fish migration. Those fish have to come around that point, right? So as opposed to being along the beach down here, maybe at Island Beach, you get out to that point right there, you've got all this water in Raritan Bay. This is where those striped bass stage out there, but they've got to make it around that point to head south. They're migrating right now. So right now is a great time to be there. Easy to get to, drive into the park, go all the way to the end. You can't miss it. Parking lot at the end says, here you go, beach number or whatever, and you just walk right out to it. Manasquan Inlet, another good spot, called a Dog Beach. That's a good spot for stripers and blues. And then there's Island Beach State Park, probably one of our most famous, or as famous as Sandy Hook. There, if you get a beach permit, you can take vehicles on the beach. So it's a big beach, long beach. And there you go. There's a bunch of places to go fishing. And I kept it under an hour. How's that? Questions? Come on.
How can you tell the weight of a rod by looking at it?
Well, they do something up in our factory that makes it easy for us, and it says
It's written there.
10 weight.
But if you say gifted a rod, it doesn't have anything written on it.
It's hard. Educated guess. This is a 10 weight. So, I get that a lot in the store. Get that a lot with bamboo rods. That was the original fly rod. So they're bamboo, and they really don't have any markings on them. And before they went to a line weight system of numbers, they used letters. It was like HGH, or HF, whatever. I don't even remember. But there was a number system that they simplified and made into a line weight none. But, if you pick it up, you can tell, like this is that's a 10 weight. Just wiggle that rod, right? You can feel the strength in it. That's a 4 weight. Yeah, so that's it. And so you can make an educated guess if you're not sure. Sometimes I'll have people come into the store and say, I'm not really sure. And we make an educated guess. We're like, it feels like a 6 weight, maybe a 7 weight. We put a reel on it with a 6 weight line or a 7 weight line. Let's go out and cast it. Let's see what casts better. And that's a lot of times that's what determines it, basically.
What is the line made of?
So inside there's a core, right? And most are like a braided Dacron core. And then there's call it PVC or plastic coating, but that's where lines have gotten way better, right? The old lines, it was just a plastic coating on there. Now, like we own a company, Scientific Anglers, I don't know if you ever heard of them, but they're one of the top fly line manufacturers. They have their own line, brand, everything. We actually kind of compete with them, but we own them. But they make our lines. And they're all, Scientific Anglers grew out of 3M. That's who owned them. So you got all these chemical engineers up there making fly lines, and they're making this stuff that is like alive. Like it's constantly migrating to the surface, so the line stays super slick and casts easier and lasts longer. So they're playing with all kinds of polymers now and doing different things. We have lines. Most of the lines we use float. But then there are lines where the first maybe 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet is actually lead core and it sinks. So maybe if I'm fishing a lake and I want to really get that fly down further, or in saltwater, in ocean applications, we'll fish a lot of sinking lines. But yeah, they're all various types of just like almost like a plastic coating.
How do you, like, say you're fishing off the beach, how do you cast out far? Because I always see these, guys with spinning reels, like
Oh, they're launching it.
100 yards.
Oh, absolutely. They're launching at 100 yards. You know where they're catching stripers right now? From here to that wall. They're right here. Because what they do is there's so much bait out there right now, right? And what those fish do is they school them up. They circle the bait, and then they push them right onto the beach. They use the beach as a barrier. If you went down there, you'd see dead sand eels and bunker on the beach that have jumped out of the water to get away from the blues and stripers, and now they're on dry sand. So, and I'm not saying this is the only way to go at the beach, but it's a heck of a lot of fun. And the majority of stripers, like I've caught striped bass fishing along the beach, their backs were out of the water. They were cruising literally this far off the beach in that much water, looking for crabs, looking for whatever that's along the edge. I've been in a boat fishing that way. I've cast my little crab pattern onto the dry sand, and you've got like 3 or 4 stripers going along the shoreline, and just before they get there, man, I twitch that little crab right in the water, right in front of them, boom, and they grab it. So, yeah, the surf casters, you see those guys launching a line. That's not fly fishing, and it's not always necessary. Sometimes it is, but in most cases, especially this time of year, the fish are like right here. They are close in. So, yep.
When you said you were floating in Dunwood, what's it like on a boat with the line hanging and everything, fly fishing?
So this sport is about line control, right? I had a guide out in Montana. He was a pretty deep thinker, and he said, Bruce, this is all about spatial awareness and line control, right? Knowing that there's a tree behind you, don't make your cast, right? Keeping your line under control. It's a balancing act, right? So, I'll strip off enough line to make the cast that I need to cast with little or no, excess here. I don't want to step on my line, you know what I mean? And then that happens. Down at the shore, you'll see a lot of the beach fishers, they use what's called a stripping basket, right? We used to make them out of those Rubbermaid dishpan things back in the day. That's all you need. And what you do is you're going to move that fly typically very fast. So all I'm doing is I would have that basket off to the side, and now I'm stripping the line right into the basket. So it's not down around my feet. It's not getting caught in the waves. God forbid you're on a jetty. I've lost fly lines that got sucked down on a wave into the rocks on a jetty, and now you can't get it. You're done. So a stripping basket is helpful. But in a boat, in that situation, it's just about line control. You don't need, you want to have enough line to make the cast that you want to make, but not too much. That's all. And just be aware of what's going on.
Do you have pointers for, like, anytime I've gone fly fishing, I have a really hard time. I have good vision, but I have
Right.
a hard time, like, sometimes spotting the fly, like
Seeing the fly.
the glare or
Oh, yeah.
whatever the case may be. Do you have pointers for that?
Well, one huge useful piece of equipment is a good pair of polarized sunglasses. You should always wear glasses. I mean, think about it. We're whipping a hook through the air. I've gotten hit with a fly, get hit with one of those big saltwater clousers, and it. I got hit in the back. I mean, those are lead dumbbell eyes, I had a guy stick a fly in my neck one time in a drift boat out in Montana. He was in the front of the boat. Woo! He came back and came forward. I'm like, So but polarized glasses will help you. It can be tough. It really can. I mean, especially if you've got glare conditions. If we're fishing really small dry flies, yeah, there's no perfect answer, but the glasses are a big help. Really, really big help. And try to, again, watch where that fly lands. You'll typically be able to see it, even if there's a lot of naturals out there, natural bugs on the surface, you usually can kind of pick your fly out, when it's on the surface. Yes?
Are the wheels weighted according to the rod also?
Within reason, yeah. You want to have, what we call a balanced outfit. So let's see how that looks. You see how that just, whoop. So that's a reel that has a 10 weight line on it. I could probably go down to a 9, maybe up to an 11 with it. But based on the weight of the rod, I want it to kind of look like that. So I don't want it, and a lot of it's aesthetics too. When I set up an outfit for somebody, it's, even though our reels will say on there, "Oh, this is for a 3, 4, or 5 weight rod." Well, not necessarily. I like to put the reel on there and say, hey, it doesn't look like a satellite dish on there. It's not oversized, but then it's also not too small. And, my rod goes like this from the balancing part. So yeah, we match the reels based on the size, and then also the capacity. It's got to be big enough to hold that larger diameter fly line. The one thing I didn't touch on is also the first component actually goes on a reel is what's called backing. And that's our insurance policy. Most fly lines are only 100 feet long. So what we do is we put either 20-pound or 30-pound braided Dacron, like that core, right, backing, and we'll usually put like that reel, the 10-weight reel probably has maybe 150 to 200 yards of backing on it. And then my fly line is attached to that. And the reason for that is in saltwater, every fish takes into your backing. I mean, that's, 100 feet is gone in a nanosecond on a big fish. Trout, not so much. But it also just helps fill out the capacity of the reel and then makes the revolution. Every time, it's a bigger tire on a bike. Each revolution just gathers more line. So, but yeah, we match. Everything is matched now. That's what's so nice about the sport now. I mean, when I started, you were putting it together yourself. Those leaders now that are just one piece tapered. Oh no, we had to build our own leaders. We were tying sections of leader to taper it, so it was a knot every 2 feet or so to get to a 9-foot leader. Now, you open up a package, done. It's got a loop in the end, loop-to-loop connection with the fly line. You're fishing in 15. We're out of the nail knot business. We don't even have to do those anymore. I teach 2 knots in our classes. One, how to tie the fly on, which most people know how to tie on a hook or a spinner or whatever. It's the same knot, clinch knot. And then the other one is just a way to add leader material to your existing leader if you want to. So it's gotten really, the barriers to entry are non-existent anymore to this sport. It's so easy. It really is. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, and the equipment's so much better. Fly lines used to be horrible. One of the big design changes too is that all these fly lines are what's called a weight forward line. Remember, we're cast in this line. We want to get moving. Well, years ago, all lines were just one diameter, level line. It was called a level line, right? Now all the lines are what's known as weight forward, meaning the first 15, 20, or 30 feet of that fly line is dramatically larger in diameter and heavier than the last 70 feet. So you get that weight forward front end moving, it delivers the cast 1,000 times easier than it used to, 30 years ago. So yeah, the equipment's light years ahead of where it used to be. So good questions. Mr. Tumler? Nothing?
I just like to hear you talk.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Anything else? Yes.
So you're going to have a fly fishing 101 kind of class that you're going
Yes.
to offer?
Yes. So one of Orvis's program, then these are all here for you guys. Just come up and grab one. And then all you do is just, if you know how to use that, just click on that and just put in your name, your email address, right? And I think we asked for your phone number. I'm not going to call you. And then what that'll do is put you into our constant contact list of fly fishing students. And on or about the 1st of January, we'll announce our schedule for the whole spring and summer. Starts in March, this year we went into July. And then we actually even added a class in August and September because of the demand. And you'll get an email, but we teach it every Saturday from March, April, May, June, July. So you'll have plenty of opportunities. Fly Fishing 101, it's free. You don't need a rod. We supply all the rods. We supply everything. We teach you to cast. First thing we do is teach you to cast. Do that for about an hour. At the end of an hour, everybody is throwing I'm not going to say a perfect loop, but they are able to go fishing. They're able to deliver that fly. Then we come back in, do a little classroom work, teach a couple knots if you need to know them, talk about flies, right? Go over some equipment questions, and you're done. It's like a two-hour class on a Saturday morning. So those will be here. Grab one of those. And then the follow-up to that class, we only offer it to people that take the 101 is 201, and that's where we go fishing at the either Conservancy Pond up there. We've used Rosedale Lake in the past. We use a local body of water somewhere, and we go fish. So you get to use what you learned in 101 in the 201 class, and you actually catch fish. Yeah. So that'll be coming up in the springtime. Yep.
What's the smallest fisherman that you take?
You could come. You could come. Absolutely. I got little rods. No, just kidding. You'll be fine. No, pick up one of these rods. That 4-weight, he could cast that 4-weight rod. I mean, there's rods, they weigh like 2 ounces. They're unbelievable. So, you had a question, sir?
Yeah, how much are freshwater licenses?
That's a good question. Well, if you're over 70, they're free in New Jersey. And you're under 16, they're free. Is it? Yeah, 50-ish with a trout stamp if you're going to fish trout stocked waters. So yeah, if you're going to fish any trout stocked waters, you can't say, oh, I'm not going to keep a trout or I'm not going to catch a trout. Now, if you're fishing waters that are stocked with trout, you need the trout stamp. Yeah, that sounds about right, I think. Yeah. So, but price of admission.
Just buy it early in the year, especially if you have a PA license, buy it early.
Buy it early in the year, exactly. Yeah, New Jersey's still on a calendar, right? Yeah, they're on a calendar deal, I think, January to.
I just tried to buy a Pensy, they wouldn't sell it to me until December 1st.
Yeah, it's
Oh, really? Huh. Anyway, every state,
wouldn't take your money.
every state.
Not until December 1st.
Really? I don't know. Let's see. Anything else? No? Yeah. I mean, it's not hard. I mean, people have stayed away from this sport for so long. They thought, oh, it's so hard. Oh, it's so technical. And Ernie Schwaber, God rest his soul. I mean, he was a groundbreaker in the sport, but he was also one of those guys that, tweed jacket with the pipe, rope matching the hatch, made you think you needed to know Latin to be able to identify the bugs. I mean, it got that bad, so everybody's like, oh, man. And like I said, the equipment used to, sorry, pardon my, it sucked, it really did, I've had people sit in my class say, oh my God, I didn't get in this because I thought I needed to learn too many knots. Like it would take me too long to get rigged up. I show them a loop-to-loop connection with the fly line. They're like, oh my God, this is all you got to do, So, like I said, the equipment has gotten so much better and easier, and relatively speaking, not expensive, So that's the other thing. You don't need a lot of stuff. So.
I have to say that one thing that's really intimidated me over the years is watching a lot of these videos where they're just pulling a fish in and the line's going. It's like I just see myself having a spaghetti.
Oh, it happens. Oh, it happens to all of us. Absolutely. Well, and that's the thing. People say, well, how do I play a fish? Well, the easiest way to play the fish is, I'm holding the rod high. I got that line under my finger. I can pinch that line and just hold that fish there. If I want to reel, I can reel.
That's what I see a few people do.
Yeah, but this is a lot easier and safer because I'm staying connected to that fish. I see what he's doing. And then that fish wants to take off and run. I just lighten my finger up. I say, okay, take some line out. And then I'm right back to it. But I can gain more line this way. Now, a big enough fish, he might take all that slack off. You're right to the reel then. Okay, I'm going to play him off the reel at that point, But I like the hand strip it in because it just gives me better control. But to your point, oh yeah, I've seen buddies. We were saltwater fishing one time. It looked like a bowl of spaghetti went up, tried to go through his guides, and it took the top 3 sections of his rod, snapped the line, the rod, everything on a real big fish because he did have too much. That's what I'm saying. There's like a balance. Keep a little bit of line out, but try to keep it under control. Oh, absolutely. We still laugh at him at this. That was bone fishing like 20 years ago. We're still, telling that story. So, but yeah, the equipment has gotten so much better. And the other thing, more convenient. All right, all these rods. We don't even make a 2-piece rod anymore. They're all 4-piece. You know, so they go in a tube. This is it. Boom. Yeah, you walk on a plane with it. You know, so makes it really, really easy. And they're durable. And God forbid, you know, Orvis has one of the best. You know, we stand behind our products. We're the oldest company out there. I mean, our rods are warranted for 25 years. So you break a rod in the next 25 years. Now, the way they're manufactured, if I broke just that tip section, I go on the website, pull up my profile. Oh, that's a Helios 2, 10-foot or 9-foot 10 weight. Whoop, I need a new tip. Point and click, you pay $60. You got a new tip in like 3 to 5 days. You don't have to send rods back for repair. I mean, all those nightmares are over. But the rods are good. My rods are really good. Another good question. All right. If you want to take a look at some flies, come on up. Check out some trout flies. These are just some of the stuff that we use. And if there's no more questions, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Come see me. Grab one of these if you're interested in the store or in a class at the store. Like I said, we'll start those up in the springtime.
Yeah, we'll send everyone this link too in that